Transitional work. Transitional work is the ability, while balancing, to move from one position, one alignment, one shape, to another. Transitions are obviously a very appealing part to handstand. And realistically, there is one transition you should start with as you start dipping your toes in that realm. And that's the transition to charger. But before we break down why and how to perform it, let's see if you are ready or not to transition. Transition suggests that you already are comfortable with your normal default shape. That is, the one that you can hold freestanding, ideally, most times for at least 5, ideally 10-15 seconds and more. Since we are moving different body parts while balancing, transitions are harder to hold than a still handstand, which, as you already know, is not that easy to hold in the first place. So if you don't have that sense of ease just yet while being on your hands in the middle of the room, there is no point in you spending too much time trying to transition. And that's something I see beginners and improvers do quite often because they are a bit too much in a rush to achieve the fancy part of handstands. Of course, it's okay to have fun, and if you don't quite have 10 seconds just yet, you can always follow the steps we're gonna lay out today and play with transitions, but make sure this is not the main part of your training. Make sure that you eat your vegetables first and leave that part for dessert. You want to understand transitions as being a journey. We are traveling from, let's say, Paris to Dublin, and we are using our car to do so. So it's going to be a long-ass journey. Or if you're watching this from across the globe, from, let's say, New York to Austin, you will not or shouldn't make the journey in one go. You will have a few coffee breaks along the way, a few pit stops, and even rent an Airbnb here and there to rest properly before you hit the road again. This is the logic we want to remember for transitions. You're moving from one city to the other. And before we even start seeing how we go from one to the other, you have to know where those two cities are on the map. Therefore, what you have to do is first learn to balance both positions. What everyone does is they balance their position and then rush their way in the unknown, hoping to catch something. So I want you first to kick up against the wall. Find your position here. Find 5 to 10 seconds of balance. And then study what the end position is like, what it's like to balance it. The charger involves us bending the front leg. That's the one that leaves the floor second. So we're gonna kick up against the wall, bend this leg, and try to balance here. And what you don't want to do is to balance your position and then guess your way into the transition, which is usually going to result in you falling. Why is the charger the first shape you should transition into? The more there is a difference in terms of shoulder angle between your start position and your end position, the harder the transition becomes. When we transition, say, from a banana to a straddle, we have to change many things simultaneously with the right timing and coordination between different body parts. The shoulders have to open, the shoulders have to move backwards. The pelvis has to overshoot while the legs lower to compensate for this alignment. And this is only possible if you do everything, if you perform every element in a timely fashion. Most beginners and improvers either hold a feet together handstand or a V-shaped staggered leg handstand. And if you want my help to get there and go beyond that, check out my online coaching in the description below. Realistically, their shoulders are not fully open yet. 99% of you will have one or those two leg positions, feet together or staggered leg, but with the shoulders slightly closed. The good thing about the charger is that we only need to move one variable, and that's one leg bending at the hip and at the knee. Nothing else changes, making the transition much more achievable. From an open V to a charger, from a feet together to a charger, from a closed V to a charger, from
a banana to a charger.
This is ideal. Remember, transitioning is harder than holding a still handstand. So we want to make our lives at first, when we dip our toes in this practice, as easy as possible. Changing only one thing while everything else stays the same in your body is going to be much easier to balance than changing your pelvis and your shoulders and everything else in between. Now, how do we practice this? Well, certainly we don't do what everybody does, which is taking off and rushing our way into the position. On the contrary, we go back to what we were saying earlier. You will take pit stops on the way to your final destination. Coffee breaks and Airbnb overnight stays. You are much better off balancing with control from your start position to the first coffee break, to the second coffee break, all the way up to your first Airbnb until you get to the final destination. And stopping where you can control, even if that's not the desired outcome, and learning how to go from the first position to there, rather than losing balance every time you rush from point A to point B.
It doesn't look as cool, but you're much better off doing this, and that, and this, and maybe that, until you are strong enough and controlled enough to go all the way down, than this.
This is all the more important for standing, because it's usually easier to transition off the wall than it is for standing. So when it's time for you to take everything to the freestanding practice, do not rush. Take your time. Enjoy your coffee breaks. Exert control in each bout of that journey, and you will quickly conquer the whole transition. If you drive non-stop for 20 hours, you will risk a crash.